Hey, I'm Alex.
You may be thinking, why are you wearing a graduation gown, old woman?
Did you get your master's? A PhD?
To which I would reply,
No. Instead, I went to my niece's graduation last weekend, where I sat there as a proud aunt and a proud citizen of 2021 to be able to take part in such a joyous, populated occasion. And through the sea of rayon gowns, I was reminded, I too have a dusty old graduation gown in my mother's double wide, and it's proven to be as useful to me as my diploma, which set me on my quest. I must use my graduation gown and transform it into a garment that is useful. In short, in short. Welcome to my graduation gown upcycle. The sketch I came up with was this.
as for design, I settled on a little black dress with puffy sleeves and a square neckline.
Now the first thing you're going to do is seam rip your graduation gown. Seam ripping is one of the funnest parts of sewing, at least for me, because it gives me an excuse to lay on the couch. Now once your seams are all ripped, begin cutting out your square neckline bodice. I used a very simple pattern I created from wrapping paper. Because I'm trying to make my garments more palatable these days, I'm adding a lining to the bodice using the same pattern, and I'm sipping Kool-Aid. Place right sides together of your bodice and your lining and begin pinning the square neckline. Then you're gonna sew it. Be sure to snip the corners of the square so that when you turn it right side out, it's not gonna be bunching up with the fabric. And when sewing the arms, I like to do a little cut here if you're a kindergartner, kind of chalk mark along the arm. Also, it's really satisfying when you're sewing and each time the needle goes into the chalk, a bunch of chalk emerges. It's very satisfying, but I'm sure it's probably not good for my machine. Then press. I read somewhere that pressing is the most important part of garment making, but you'd think it's sewing. Anyway, then you're gonna sneak a little top stitch to set the lining in place so it's not all kerfuffled and kerfunkled. You're gonna do the same thing to the back. However, depending on your gown, you might not have enough fabric to make a whole bodice back in one fell swoop, so you might have to take two different pieces. I just sewed the pieces together and made a lining for it like I did the front. And then I'm sewing the two top straps. So my bodice pieces are attached at the arms. And what I'm going to do is put two darts so that it gives a little shape for the bust area. Once the darts and the sides are sewn together, your bodice is done and it's time to move on to the belle of the ball, your Puff Daddy sleeves.
Quiet, you're being puffed. What you're about to do and what you're about to say will remain forever between the members of the Puffs and only the members of the Puffs.
It's the most important part, and it's also the funnest part. Here's the thing that makes a graduation gown upcycle so brilliant. The gown I had, which I think a lot of gowns do have this, the back bib is lined with interfacing. And interfacing is going to look like just almost, imagine like a very thick piece of tissue paper that's actually fabric. It just gives structure. Nice and crisp. If you want to get those really big puffed sleeves, this is perfect. So here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna tear that sucker out of that back bib, and then you're gonna tear it in half like it's your transcript. Then stick the interfacing into the top part of your sleeve. And what I did was basically pinned little gathers with the fabric of the sleeve and the interfacing, little gathers to give that little puffed shape. And then after I pinned it, I just quickly hand sewed it together to keep it in place for when I actually sew it onto the bodice. And so I just pushed it through, and then that's it.
You're all puffed up!
To make the sleeves clean on the inside, you can line your sleeves. I did not. I'm really liking the way it's looking. The only issue is that the square neckline is just slightly too wide to hold up the literal weight of these sleeves. What I'm gonna do is just make a little strap to connect in the back. And I'll just seam rip the lining, slip in the strap, sew it back up, and yeah, we're just gonna keep on trucking. Excuse me. Let me pause curb. So I pinned my little strap.
Little strap. Those women goes with ice around my neck. Dirty pop. Let's go.
Not in a broy, let's go, roll tide kind of way, but let's go. So all I did was just like hand stitch this little pleat. It was like I took a 6-inch width and just brought it together. So this is the part where we cut the sleeve to make a little short sleeve. You're gonna sew your hem and then you're gonna leave a little gap at the end so that you could stick in your 40-year-old elastic. This elastic says that it was 35 cents. Through there, tie it back up, and then you're gonna close up that hem, and then you're completely done with the puff daddies. Now the skirt part of the dress is super easy. However, I will say when I seam ripped the gown, I seam ripped everything. So I had to re-sew that back seam of the gown to make the skirt. And I used a serger. And as you can see, that is white thread because I was too lazy to switch it back to black. And I regretted almost as much as that time I took a 3000 level Henry James class. So I've pinned up the skirt to the bodice. I accidentally really scarred myself kind of severely while trying to put it on, so I don't really have an accurate representation about how it's going to look. We're just gonna serge it and see where we end up after that, which may be the final reveal, or I might have to adjust things. It's perfect. I just want to give you a little tip. If you keep having to change clothes and you don't want to get makeup on your clothes, taking like a silky piece of fabric, like lining fabric, you just have to throw it on your face like so, and then you just do this. And it's that easy. Oh my god.
I pledge myself to the puffs. Loyal I'll always be. A P to start, 2 F's at the end, and a U sitting in between.
So that concludes this video. Stay in school, kids. You might get a gown at the end that you could inevitably turn into a Puff Daddy mini dress. But if your gown is rented, don't do this.